Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made.
And I'm Ross, creative director of Epic Made, and we're the hosts of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Some past guests include Marcy Selsberg of Blah 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 and Rebecca Blake of Optimum Design and the Graphic Artists Guild.
Cool. So we're forever grateful for the sponsors of our we're forever grateful for the sponsors of our podcast.
We've totally been doing this for a while.
What'd you say, Ross?
So we've totally been doing this for a while.
Yeah, obviously. And as always, this episode is brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a collaborative of expert artists and animators who help brands tell powerful, engaging stories. We've demonstrated our expertise in visual storytelling, fantasy pop culture, and detailed world building in collaboration with some of the biggest brands in the entertainment space, including Sci-Fi, Nickelodeon, and TNT. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign.
So with us today, we have Joe Weaver. He's a serial technology entrepreneur from Hampton Roads, Virginia. His most recent venture is starting a gaming studio called Oceanty to develop new and innovative mobile games. His first title, which is in development, is called Tough Turtles. It's a simple physics-based puzzle game for all ages. Welcome, Joe. Glad to have you.
Hey, glad to join.
Heck yeah. So,
I've known Carl and your company for a long while. You know, being in Hampton Roads, there's not too many people doing cool stuff and making cool content. So it's definitely awesome to be on your guys' podcast and chat more with you guys.
Absolutely. We appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
And likewise. So today we are actually going to be talking about something that you know a lot about, and I feel like we have ideas about, but love to see how those line up. Is basically positioning an idea for investor or publisher interest. And we sort of talked a little bit before the podcast, and there is somewhat of a thin line between those two things, or possibly a thick line between those two things, whether it's investors or publishers, correct?
Yeah, there's definitely serving two different end goals. So when you think of being an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you have to make money. So that means you're making a product, you're servicing clients, or you're servicing, making entertainment for consumers. So with that, you need capital to, eat, sleep, pay other people
to live. Yeah.
To live. Yeah. So part of the journey that you go along, especially early stage, is either you're doing it yourself or you're, doing it on the weekends and trying to bootstrap it. Or a lot of people, when they get to a certain stage too, they look at ways to bring on more capital to get that idea out of their, house and into something real, and bring on employees and kind of scale up their idea after they've proven some type of minimal viable product or MVP.
Right. So what you're saying is that you can't survive entirely on creativity alone, right? Like you actually need money.
Yeah, at some point you have to either, have rich, relative pass away, or
rich aunt.
Yeah, you have to, win the lottery, or you have to, work, endlessly through the night, after you work your day shift. So
the first rule of entrepreneurship: don't die. So
yeah, it's definitely. I think a lot of people go into entrepreneurship. They think that's a 24/7. They have to hustle, and I think the goal is to get a product as minimal viable as possible. So do something within a very short period of time, validate it, and once it's validated and you have consumers and potential, then that's where the investors can come in, and that product can, stand on its own and say, hey, look at this cool thing I've made. Hey, investor, it's going to take X, Y, and Z, or this amount of time, which equals a certain amount of money to bring this to market. But that initial MVP is critical. So you have to build that initial product, and then you have to get your first customer or your first 10 customers or 100 or 1,000. And then from there, you can take your idea or your product and then pitch the results of that early kind of traction to gain leverage to potentially get some type of monetary upfront cash to take it to a larger level, or bring it, oh yeah, it's going to take me 2 years at night to do this for real. First, okay, I can, take on capital. I can bring, 5 more people on. We can finish this and execute and get returns on your investment very quickly.
And so that MVP, that's minimum viable product, right? Is that what?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you still have to make something. A lot of people go into this idea of like, I'm going to go get a publisher. I'm going to go get an investor before I make that product. And sometimes serial entrepreneurs are able to do that. So you do hear stories of people saying, hey, I've exited 5 companies.
Yeah, they have a track record though. Like they've already done that several times, so they don't need to do it anymore.
And they don't tell you that side of the story.
No.
That, you hear all these things like, oh wow, this guy raised like $4 million and doesn't even have a product. And you're like, then you go look at his resume. He's like, oh yeah, he's already made like $10 million after exiting 4 companies before this. And basically that investors just want to take all of his knowledge before and invest in whatever new idea that he'll most likely exit.
Right.
Again.
And so the whole thing there is you got to position yourself from what you're saying. And my understanding here is positioning yourself and your idea and your brand, the whole thing, to have a very growable value, right? So that they want to invest some money in you. And that can be, if you're unknown, the idea's got to work, and you've got to have that MVP on the level that makes sense. And if your idea, if you're fully unknown, right, like that, you can't trade on your personal brand equity, which is what it sounds like some of those other people have done in the past. So,
yeah, I think starting out, you have to build that initial product, meaning like you have to, if it's an app, you have to build the app, and you really can't find anybody else to do it. You kind of have to go build whatever content first.
Yeah.
Get your customers, so market, bring it to, individuals to try to, sell it. And then from there, you start validating your idea. And a lot of times, like, people don't realize 95% of startups fail.
Right.
So a lot of times people stick to some idea for a very long period of time instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to go into this knowing that I'm going to fail. But the goal of any entrepreneur is to fail as fast as possible. So I'm going to get that MVP out as quickly as possible. As if you're not embarrassed by your first product, you launched way too late.
Yeah.
So a lot of early people, they'll take an idea and they're like, oh, they're constantly tweak it or modify, or think that it has to be this full end-to-end solution. When really you should always look at what's going to drive the most value in that first iteration of what you're selling. And then constantly just take the scope and then just chop it away until you get to that one core piece that you could possibly sell or validate. And then from there, get it out there, move with the customers, and then have it evolve as it gets the hands of the public or what solution you're trying to solve.
Do you feel like every entrepreneur should seek some form of investment at some point in their project? Or
what the goal of, being an entrepreneur is make money?
Of course. Yeah. Sure.
So at the end of the day, like, it sucks, you have to have money to make money sometimes. Mm-hmm. In the perfect world, you wouldn't take and give up anything. But the reality of the world is a lot of times marketing or building a product needs some level of capital that's beyond you, or needs some level of effort to get this to your customer. So
right.
I in the perfect world, you would own 100% of your company and you wouldn't take on any capital, because it does change the dynamics or control of your idea or the timeline of how fast you're moving. So once you take on other people's money, then it's not your idea anymore. You have milestones or investor overlords to appease. So
Overlord. I love that.
you're constantly either, giving them updates or pushing milestones. So a lot of taking on capital is you already have a proven kind of strategy of where you want to be. And then you're executing that strategy over a year and a half, probably maximum, with your publisher or your investors. And then they're constantly checking in on different milestones to make sure that you're hitting things. And that helps validate it, the close relationship you have with the people taking on that risk of giving you money.
Right. Sure. So I have a question that I've been interested to ask, knowing that you were going to be on the podcast. So where do you find these people, right? Like, where do you what's the process of going about finding an investor or a publisher for something? And do those two things differ? Like, how do you get in the room with Netflix compared to how do you get in the room with someone from Shark Tank? Figuratively speaking.
Yeah, it's two different roles. I'll talk to the world of like investment.
Okay.
So a lot of those will have like venture capitalists, VCs for short. They're kind of a set group of funds. So a fund is a group of all these people's money that they've collected, and it's managed by a group of kind of financial analysis and legal experts that are helping manage that money's allocation to startups.
Okay.
So it's just a different way for rich people to diversify how they invest. So us rich people, if I have $100 million, I'm putting it into stocks, I'm putting it into early stage companies, I'm putting a certain amount into land, art. It's just another way, and they're incentivized by different ways, to and tax breaks to do this. So it helps early stage companies get capital, which are high risk, and then really at the high income individuals taking this risk get tax breaks on other things. So it's a cycle, but it's not as big as a stock market or other things, but it's just another way for them to diversify how they spend capital. And a lot of times they have a venture capital group that they're managing their own companies. I'm the CEO of Pepsi. I'm making $100 million a year. I'm just giving, $2 million to a venture capital group that's managing the distribution of that. And then a venture capital group is basically saying, okay, well, I know 95% of these companies are going to fail. My goal is to find that 5% that just blow that out of the water.
Right.
And get that, 20, 30x, 100x return. I invested $1 million and this company sold for $1 billion. And my returns were 150 to 200 million off that 1 million. So at the end of the day, the venture capital, they know a majority of that money is going to vanish.
Right. It's like playing the lottery.
Yeah.
You're trying to get the one ticket with higher percentage, with a higher percentage rate, basically.
They're hedging all their bets to like, basically they're going to lose on 95% of them, but that 5% is going to make up the profit for all of it.
Yeah. And that's why they want those ideas to move fast. So when you think of their mindset is, okay, I want you to give us the money and I want that money to, either get to these certain milestones or this company to fail. So
the money needs to basically burn through as quickly as possible, one way or the other, either successfully or unsuccessfully, because otherwise you're just frozen in space.
Yeah. And normally if you hit certain milestones, then you can go on and raise more capital. That's why there's different rounds, A, B, C, E, F. And those different milestones are driven really mathematically how companies are growing at certain points. And a lot of times companies kind of fall in the exact same buckets of how they grow. There's very few instances like Facebook or other wild cards that just went from like 1 to 100 million users. There's a certain thresholds that like it's easy to get to 1 to a million, and then like the 5 million mark is like a kind of a dead zone. Like a lot of startups just kind of don't pass that threshold, but if they can get to 5 million, then they can easily get to 20, 30, 40. And then those investors are looking at companies that are hitting those milestones and then putting more capital in to help them get to those certain different market kind of goals.
So if I have a business and I'm looking for this like a what is it, venture capital group? Like, do I just go to like venturecapitalclub.com, or like do you have to know people, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think a lot of this, just like any type of group of individuals that have money, they don't have the time to be wasted, because of course a lot of entrepreneurs have crazy ideas and they don't understand the whole process. Right. So there's still this kind of vetting, kind of early stage, like the minor leagues, I call it. You go into the minor leagues, if you want to get in the big game and get the actual VC's attention, either you're making $1 million a year, which early on, that's really hard to do with no capital investing.
Right.
Or you're making like 50, 100, 200,000, which is good, steady income. And then you have an idea of how to take what you're doing and turn it into a platform or service or something that's highly scalable. But that will take more development time, more resources. And then you take that idea and you start pitching it to accelerators, and then accelerators work like the minor league, baseball games. VCs come in, they scout, they've already been pre-vetted. They're seeing the cream of the crop, and then they're able to concentrate their effort on trying to find individuals that meet some of those early thresholds. Or
so an accelerator or like an incubator, like all of those like business collaboratives, that their actual goal is to be the minor league baseball team of major league investment.
Yeah. And you really can't go reach out to investors.
Right.
They don't really care. They're managing their own portfolio of companies that they've already invested in and trying to work with other investors on other later stage investments too. So especially early on, there's no way to do that other than kind of being an accelerator or incubator, and then having that validation of going through that process, because a lot of those accelerators too kind of have a dual focus of teaching you the basics of how to run a startup. So like managing people, pitching ideas, making something scalable, focusing on the customer journey and marketing and all the things that, building the product is like 10%.
Right.
And then the other 90%, they want to give you a crash course on how to build a company through that accelerator.
So Joe, you've been at this for a long time now. When did you start your first company?
Yeah, so I started my first company in 2015. So,
is it Ario or no?
No, I tried to do like AI before this.
Okay.
That really didn't work out. And then I pivoted to AR just because Pokemon Go came out, HoloLens. We were doing development with the previous job I was working with. So it was definitely something new and hot. And, 7-8 years ago, there was tons of venture capital and interest in the potential for augmented reality.
Yeah.
Seems like it's coming back as well with Apple just dropping.
Yeah, it's definitely come full circle, because it's HoloLens has been out for 10 years and nobody's really, cared about that. Now,
it wasn't very functional in terms of, it was just so big and ridiculous. And like, I mean, I put it on and blew my mind the first time, but it was definitely like not practical, really.
I'm shocked by the positivity on this when it's not even in market or close to being market. Like,
right.
Stocks through the roof.
Yeah.
It's not even based upon sales of this product yet.
And it's a $3,500 device. It's just, how many people are actually going to buy that? Like businesses, like no consumers. I mean, maybe some like bougie maybe like the iPad, the iPhone crowd. I don't know. I don't subscribe to all that. So
it's definitely niche. It was very interesting what they were pitching it as. it was half enterprise, half TV. When they were in the gaming, they were smart to kind of push that off and not say anything about it, because Magic Leap and other people that have raised a lot of money on their product solely around gaming, that was the same price point. Didn't really make sense to what game developer is going to make a game for 100 people that could afford that device. At the end of the day, what happened to Magic Leap was they focused so much on making this and pitching this idea of this game engine that's going to cost $3,500, and then nobody was making content, because who would make content to buy on a market of less than a couple hundred people that bought the product?
Yeah, there's no way to make a return on investment. Like you said, it's all about making money, and if they can't make, there's no one there to buy it. So
at least Apple has the ability to say, okay, well, if you already have an AR app for iPhone or your iPad, it can transition to this new medium. So, but these other platforms, such as HoloLens or Magic Leap, they were just this walled garden that said, okay, well, you have to go reinvent your whole app and do everything from scratch, and then put it on this thing, and then it's just a dead ecosystem from the start.
Sure. Now, so that's really interesting. So you've clearly been ahead of your time for a while, which is, if you can find the sweet spot, that's the real, you can really do some crazy cool stuff, which you have. So I'm curious to know, like, what's top of mind for you right now, just in all the tech industries and all the things going on with AI and all gaming and all the things. Like, I'm really curious what's buzzing in your head. So
yeah, I think the industry, I'm kind of going back to my roots, back into game development, back into mobile. And right now the thought process is to build a game that's highly, consumable for multiple different age ranges. And now that my competitor Angry Birds got bought by Sega, there's definitely going to be a demand for a similar type of medium from that Netflix or other streaming platforms will want to consume. So you're seeing a lot of shift now to these streaming tools and streaming platforms, and gaming is just starting to become a new streaming war.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that, because my wife and I recently played a trivia game on Netflix, which you wouldn't think that is a thing, right? Yeah. Like, so I guess, so what is the difference then in like the incubator investor group, venture capitalist group side of things compared to, eventually approaching a streaming service for the game that you're making? Like, what is the difference there in terms of process?
Yeah, I think a lot of them, they want exclusivity. So they want some type of unique IP that's exclusive to their streaming service. So think of the same way, you're consuming different types of movies or TV shows today on these platforms. They want something unique to say, hey, if I have Angry Birds on this streaming Sega service that's on Sony devices, it's going to bring those customers to the streaming service.
Right.
So you're starting to see these battle lines being drawn out from Xbox to Sony to Netflix. And even I would suspect that Disney is going to have some type of streaming gaming service as these things evolve. And each one of those services are going to have that same mentality of that game world to say, okay, well, there's going to be these walled gardens of like EA's going to be locked into Sony or Xbox, which makes it harder for companies to make something more consumer friendly, to like mass market something.
Yeah, more accessible. Yeah.
But what will happen is these streaming services will have to compensate the individuals in different ways. So the same way as Netflix and different things, all have to pay for these products to be exclusive to these platforms. They're going to have to pay dividends or royalties on usage on those platforms. So it's just kind of this unique new arcade mentality. I see that's going to come to fruition, where today a lot of that revenue from games are either driven by Steam or purchasing the game, or through ad revenue from freemium, where you're, getting a lot of revenue from video ads or from in-app purchases. And that's going to shift more to that streaming services, where your games are going to be part of a streaming service, and then you're going to be paid royalties based upon how many hours was streamed, how many plays you had. And it's just a different kind of mentality when it comes to monetization, which will be interesting. And I think it will have to evolve. But if it's profitable to certain individuals and certain companies, it will definitely drive better and more content to certain platforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that streaming, especially I think the consoles in themselves might be dying. I feel like there's no real, like, you don't even need an Xbox anymore. You can just stream everything on your PC, and like, I don't know, there's not a lot of, it's interesting, like all these separate industries are kind of converging now to be each other's competitors. Like, Netflix is now getting heavily into gaming, like you're saying, and Amazon, and they don't even need a console, right? So it's very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I look back at, buying games, and I subscribe to the Sony system, where I can stream the games. And it's not like I'm streaming old content like PS1 or PS2. I'm streaming newer games, and it's streaming the quality I want. Yeah. And I'm paying one, subscription to varying amount of content. So it's just interesting, the shift. And I think with that shift, there will be early adapters, and being a startup means you can move faster into any type of new medium, and you could focus or take these chances early on and be part of this new ecosystem. So with any shift, fundamentally in some type of new medium, like the early adopters are always going to be that early startups that are nimble, that can move fast and take advantage of those new markets.
Yeah, absolutely. So I imagine all of this is all this thought process is going into, your brand that you're building now, your new startup, and it's Oceanty, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Apologize. Super cool idea. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I've done in the past the enterprise AR military, platform kind of play. That's terribly hard. I'm competing against PTC, $1 billion companies. I'm trying to make stuff and sell it to enterprises, long sales cycles. So this time around, when I was looking to build a company, a startup, I was like, oh, all right, well, like the sales cycle is so much easier freemium.
Yeah.
Well, like freemium is such an easier thing to sell, like early on. And it's easier way to monetize from a smaller company or even an individual. So,
and define freemium real fast for some people who might not be familiar with that.
Yeah, when look at games, they're technically free, but the creators of the game can have triggers in their game to have ads. And they're basically just making ad revenue. So you think of like how YouTube stars like Mr. Beast makes all his money. It's really because his videos are being played and then ad revenue is being generated by you viewing content before, middle, end of those different content. So same way with video games, you can embed videos, add content either for other games or other products. And then there's a type of rev share between the ad companies and the producers of the game to get some of that revenue trickle down to you. So,
okay.
And also in-game purchases is a big thing, right? Whereas the game itself is free, but you can kind of pay to play or pay to play better or so on and so forth. And those are.
Yeah. And the funny thing about the game industry is like, when you look at the statistics on in-app purchases, it's such a weird scenario. You're like, okay, well, like how many people actually buy stuff? Well, it's only like 5%.
Oh, really? It's that low?
Players like buy stuff.
Yeah.
And then 1% will buy like $100, a year on average on things. So you look at the revenue on the in-app purchases, it's like these whales that all these big game companies are trying to bring in. And it's such a weird dynamic where it's not really driven towards the mass gamers. It's really driven to a very small subset of your users. And that very small subset of users will spend,
Right.
On average,
it's like
$100 a year compared to like the average person will maybe spend $1, a lifetime.
It's like a floodgate for some of these people who are just like, oh yeah, well, I'm willing to spend money on a game, so it doesn't really matter how much money I spend on the game. And whereas the average person is a little bit more apparently a little bit more choosy or risk tolerant about paying money for a free game.
Yeah, so you constantly have two kind of end customers. You have the freemium people that you're generating revenue off the ads, and then you have these whales, these like super buyers, right, that want to consume content, and that content is really driven off a very small subset of your users. So keeping that balance happy of the freemium customers, not being overloaded with ads or content,
right,
and then also driving content for that 5% that's going to keep buying, day after day, spend, couple hundred or potentially a month if they are latched onto a game and find value in it.
It's interesting because a friend of mine is actually he used to work for Bethesda and a couple other places as well. Don't mind the tiny intruder. But no, my buddy PJ Silverman that I grew up with, his literal job was to analyze the user base of all the people in these mobile games and figure out at what point which users were going to spend money on a freemium model and like how much they should invest in different types of users, and built an entire algorithm around this, which was really fascinating. So yeah, and it's interesting that there's a whole like science behind that, and also balancing like, hey, we can't make this game come off as pay to win, but it can't be too hard, it can't be too easy, and it's all of that. It's a delicate balancing act. So
yeah, I think that's where it's funny that you look at Zynga and King and all these early kind of large companies that went bananas, and their secret sauce was that they hired psychologists to understand what sounds, what noises, what things did we learn from Vegas, that we can implement in a game to make this addictive, but drive customers to want to do that in-app purchase. So at the core of gaming and these gaming companies, some of the highest paid and some of the most secret analytic content and most IP that these companies have is this psychological portfolio of tools or content or data that they've collected that's made them that platform or game they've made super addictive. Or
I mean, that's something that I would definitely be interested in. I love that sort of stuff in art. Like when we create projects for our clientele at Epic Made, we spend a lot of time looking at the psychology of how people respond to color, how people respond to certain symbols and things like that. I mean, obviously, having a dedicated team of psychologists tell you what causes someone to spend all of their livelihood in Vegas, working with you to create an addictive free mobile app game, I'm sure is the big leagues of that concept. But that's definitely something I'd be interested in getting my hands on. That'd be super fun.
You got to balance the ethics of how to execute that power in a way that you don't feel terrible about.
There are no ethics in business, Carl.
Yeah. Well, there's ethics in my business, bro.
What's that joke? You never see someone crying on a jet ski.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you never see someone crying on a jet ski or in a private jet.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask? All right. So knowing all these things, how does this incorporate all into what you're trying to do with Oceanty?
Yeah. So like analytics are very important, and what I look at when I'm trying to make any type of content is not reinventing the wheel. So taking an IP that's already well established and trying to build a competitor to it and trying to build something unique, marketable, something that, hey, if you played Angry Birds you're going to understand how to play this game.
Right. Sure.
And if you like that content, I can target all my advertising, all my, early ad spend to making sure that I'm in that same realm of customers that are searching for that already established brand, and that's a smart way to think of it. Like it's going to be super simple, and it's something that, I can get out with 30 levels. Mm-hmm. And then people would be perfectly fine with, the next update, adding more levels.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then seasonal content and changing things up. So as far as this kind of medium goes, I wanted something that is child friendly, that appeals to a broad range of people, and something that I can iterate on over 10 years. And something that if version 1's probably not going to do that much. But, all the data, all the analytics, if I have localization to, 18 different countries, it might become popular in certain regions if I find some traction. And over time, I'm able to dial in the different content or triggers or things that can drive this to evolve to something that could be competitive at a larger scale.
Right. Yeah. And once you have that MVP and it's a provable working thing, and you have, even 1,000 users, right? Then you get an investor and you dump a bunch of money in marketing, and that's when it blows up, right? Like, not to oversimplify it, but I feel like that's the...
Yeah. I think you want to, a smart entrepreneur will know what triggers. It's very easy to go and say, hey, I have this proven formula that if I dump $100 into this, I get $120 back.
Sure.
And that, this scales to X, Y, and Z. So then you can take that formula to an investor and very easily be able to back it with the data from the previous examples. And then your milestones become really simple. Then it just becomes a very simple saying, hey, this much ad spend will have this much churn, this much conversion, and this much retention.
Right.
And then you're just constantly going back every month and just making sure that you're still, the data is still pointing that way. And it's very easy for you to spend money knowing that you're going to make money. It's basically, you're taking the data from the past, predicting the future, and then constantly, reevaluating that data to make sure that the future is still happening the way you predict.
Yeah, it's risk mitigation. And also going toward that, like speaking more to that risk mitigation as something that you mentioned earlier of why you're kind of modeling in a similar space to Angry Birds. You see that in pitch decks a lot too, where there's this advice kind of floating around where you want to kind of say, hey, my story or my idea or my project is basically this meets this, and it's 2 proven projects that have clear audiences that you can then market to people who like these things, and they will in turn like your thing if it's on par.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do as an early product or idea or is say, this is something new.
Yeah. You've never seen this
You've never seen this before. You know what it means to an investor? It means, this is going to either, be very hard to sell to a customer or need a lot of capital to get in the market. Which doesn't mean that necessarily it's a bad idea. It's just a lot harder to sell, or it takes a lot of time, or it might need, some type of like random event to trigger it to become insanely popular. But
it's why we get remakes and reboots and stuff like that. Incessantly. Yeah. It's kind of the same concept of, well, we know there is a proven audience for this thing, so let's just make the thing better so that same proven audience comes back and buys it again, or goes back and watches that movie again, or goes back and
it all ties back into making more money, and you can do that more consistently by taking less risk. Right? Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
And I think early on, you want, either looking at investment or looking at building a product, you want to de-risk that as much as possible. So I think a lot of people go into game development, they're like, oh, I have this dream game. Like, this is not my dream game. Like, I would love to do some other thing, that's like a passion project. But like, at the end of the day, if this is making money and I can iterate and have fun and do something, I know that it's from all the data, it's the smartest play I can do with my time and resources right now. So,
yeah, I think there's this fleeting idea, this very like intangible, difficult to grasp idea that you should always be doing what you love or your dream thing. And I think it bleeds out into like, oh, well, I don't want to make a game because I like making games. I want to make the game that I have in my head, right? Like I want to make the movie or I want to make the show. And that might be your end goal. Like I'm sure, Joe, that you have an idea of what your magnum opus could possibly be. But the idea that we should just go do that because it's the most authentic thing out of the gate, I think a lot of people trip up there because not only is it difficult to sell to an investor or a producer, like you said, where, you know, it doesn't have as most of our best ideas, they are rarer in the market, right?
Yeah.
But on top of that, you iterate on it. So like you don't want it to be imperfect internally, right? And so you iterate on it over and over again, and it's difficult to get out of you and onto the market without this toiling long process where investor money gets stagnant and so on and so forth. And I think that the concept that, like you said, of like, hey, I like doing this. I like making games. And so I'm making a game and having fun with it and know that I can iterate on it and evolve it. And I will enjoy doing that, even if it's not the game. I think it's something that a lot of people could really learn a thing or two about. Like, I think it's going to be a really revealing point to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I'm a very analytical person. So when I look at trying to do something, I'm very risk averse. And so I already know going into building something that I have a 95% chance of failure. So either what I make will be awesome and I can use that failure to, you know, as a showpiece to get another job or work at something that's successful, or it gets legs and moves and it becomes something that evolves over time. And like any startup, what you started doing, like what I started with Ario and what it ended up being and what it was sold as was nothing like what we pitched it at in 2015. Right. And the exact same way with this game, Tough Turtles version 1 will look nothing like version, 5 years from now, if it's still going.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So it just kind of evolves. And part of that is the journey. Like once you make something and put it out in the world and have people experience it and you're very proud of the product and you make it in such a way that the quality is great. The marketing is on point. And you put your passion and soul in it. There's the journey that it opens up is amazing. I look back at working in an office for 15 years, first 7 years of being an entrepreneur. I've traveled the world. I've set my own time. I've hired awesome people. I've fired people.
Less than awesome people.
Yeah. But along that journey, I've grown so much to understand, what's my weaknesses and what's my powers and what things do I enjoy. And a lot of building something is there's good parts and bad parts. You have to do everything. I hate marketing. I hate, all the drudgery of, animating and doing all the little things that
that we love.
Yeah. But my part of my brain, I like the analytics, I like the coding, but getting that MVP out means I have to learn or do it as best as possible as I can in those avenues to get something to market. But once it gets to market, your goal as a company and a founder and CEO is to take whatever you're doing and work your way out of it and then hire people better than you. So I constantly look back at Ario and we had some of the most crazy advanced people making that app. The idea was huge. The industry was interesting. And when you're selling somebody an idea, say I'm going to go make the next Angry Birds. And a lot of game people will probably be really excited, like, oh my God, everybody knows that it's a brand. It helps get people excited.
Right.
And that is that like high level, mentality that gets people behind it. But at the end of the day, you got to do all that stuff early on. And then once you get capital and money, then you start finding other, Kool-Aid drinkers to join your band.
Yep.
And then you start making even cooler stuff as the band starts practicing and you start getting into flow. And it's really like building a band. You basically have an idea of like these cool rock songs that you want to make. And then you kind of start, go on the street, playing these cool tunes. And then as it evolves, you're like, okay, well, one day we're going to be playing stadiums. And I'm going to have the best guitarist, going to have the best drummer and the best this. And then all us going to make this cool thing. And the combination of all these different skill sets, the end product is going to be like mind blowing.
Right.
Yeah. That's that dream.
I think that kind of leads us to our last question. Carl, you want to take it away?
Sure. So, we have a last question for you, Joe. We want to point people to your website. That's oceanty.com. And let me pick here from our roulette of final questions. I think, let's see. Who are some of your favorite mentors and their best advice?
Yeah. So one of the accelerators I'm going through right now in kind of the early stage kind of incubator is 757 Studios. So they're kind of a early stage group of individuals that come together at assembly that build a early MVP and start getting market traction and learning from others within the ecosystem of the startup community here in Hampton Roads. And then the goal is to have individuals evolve out of that into 757 Accelerate and potentially get venture capital from either individuals within their own angel network or angel networks, local to Virginia or North Carolina or even South Carolina.
Okay.
So great advice I had is someone once said, don't be Jimi Hendrix in your garage. Go, get yourself out there. And a part of me being in the 757 Excel Studios is being around other entrepreneurs and people doing stuff and, being in community with you guys, doing cool stuff. It helps, you don't want your idea just sitting at your desk or, at your home. You want it out there in the world around other creative people like you guys.
Yeah.
Because your feedback, your interest, the community's interest definitely helps give you engaged passion or insights that you might not have just sitting at home thinking things.
Yeah, sure. Beautiful, man. I love that. And it resonates with me a lot. I actually, I'm making a push to do what Carl's been working on for maybe the last 6 months or so. And that's getting more personally out into the creative space and the creative community and the entrepreneurial community as an individual, and not just Epic Made or this podcast or things like that. And I know that just that the concept of, you don't want to be this this hermited talent, that you need to figure out where you stand in the pantheon of other like-minded creatives and learn from where maybe you don't even realize you have faults yet because you haven't been tested by peers. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, like you guys being creatives, it's definitely being around other creatives is that energy you need to survive.
Absolutely.
So,
for sure.
Especially when you're starting a startup, I could sit in my house and do this, but being in, an office, nice, that the city's and the 757 Studios is free service. But the goal is, for me to build a company and to hire individuals and hire other companies to do stuff. And, success isn't one man show. Like right now, it's Joe Weaver just doing all this coding and animation, but the goal is for Joe to work his way out of a job and hopefully find other companies, other individuals to help build something cool here.
For sure, man.
Absolutely.
And huge shout out to Drew Umvarsky and Assembly and the whole crew there for putting that sort of hub together in the Hampton Roads for people like yourself and myself to go meet and mingle with other entrepreneurs and make those collisions and connections and build up our area. So
absolutely
cool.
So guys, we've been talking to Joe Weaver, who once again is the founder of Oceanty Gaming Studio. Keep an eye out for his first game, Tough Turtles. Where should people go to follow up with you, Joe, either about the game or just to ask you some questions personally, either social media or what?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, oceanty.com. I have a sign up right now for early beta access for the game. So I'm going to get early kind of traction, get early feedback, hopefully in the next week or so, get some early levels out. I'm to the stage of the game development where I'm just wrapping up all the analytics within the game to understand what to do the score. So I'm collecting all the points, but I now need to actually do something with it to say, did you win? Did you lose?
That's an important part of game design, I imagine.
So I'm tweaking all that code to make sure it works. And then my goal is hopefully get out some early beta testing and then have it evolve with community. So I have all the analytics in the game. So my goal is to get out a web-based version that will be able to be accessed through anybody's browser. And then certain individuals, when they sign up, will also have access to a test flight build or a Google Play build so they can play it on their phone. And I'll push out every 2 weeks updates and then hopefully get out a YouTube video series kind of starting that campaign of showing how I'm making this and tell a story of how I worked at Amazon, making $250,000 a year, and I quit to go do this cool thing next and
heck yeah,
build something interesting here. And that will be a devlog series around my name of Get Good, which will hopefully tell a story of how I made something cool or made something mobile.
Hell yeah.
It sounds awesome, Joe. We're looking forward to seeing that. And we're also looking forward to beta testing the Tough Turtles. And we thank you so much for being on our show.
Well, thank you guys. And I'm excited to have you guys try and be part of this community.
All right. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Joe. And till next time, everybody.
Take it easy.
Peace.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.